Sorry about the right-hand side of the screen. So thank you all for coming to this talk, whether in flesh or online. My name is Dawn. I work at the New York Times. I make charts and maps and diagrams and all that fun stuff. And some of the talks earlier today makes me feel kind of lame, talk about my work, but that's what I'm going to do anyway. A little disclaimer, I'm not a professional cartographer. I did not study cartography or geography or any related discipline. So that's why everything I'm going to show is based on my personal experience. So if you see anything that doesn't quite pass your professional eye, please bear with me. So I'm going to start a talk with cliche-ish analogy that, in my personal opinion, life is all about making choices. And we make little decisions like what to wear today to what profession we want to do, from what to eat for breakfast to where we want to live for the next few years. So all these little decisions come together and forge the path of our unique life experience. And making maps is really not that different. When making maps, we have to make all kinds of decisions, from what projections to use to what highlight color to pick, from how detailed we want the roads and boundaries to be to how much labelings we want to do. And your final product is really the manifestation of all these decisions we make along the way. But there's one big difference between the two, and I'll explain with these very not Timesian diagrams. So on the left-hand side, we have this kind of like life. Life is a one-way street, and even though along the way you're presented with many different choices, you can only pick one, and we're only to find out one permutation of all the possibilities, and that's the thrilling part of the life, but it's also scary. But making map is not that scary. As you can see on the right-hand side, we can explore all the possibilities, and it's almost like having a crystal ball. You're able to find out the outcome of each decision you're going to take, and then be informed and pick the best one. So that is what I'm going to talk about today, with specific examples of specific decisions we made for specific stories. And you'll see that there's no uniform decision-making process, or there's no secret formula. And it's a lot of exploration, and ultimately pick the best one that fits the best for your story. So I'm going to start with Choose to Break Free. What you're going to see is not a conventional map, but it did start from a map. This is a diagram showing the travel network, the most traveled to international destinations. People from Wuhan go to these places. And this sits in a large narrative stories we did earlier last year to reconstruct how the virus got out of China and it spread all over the world, and to explore dynamics between travel restrictions and the spread of the coronavirus. And we wanted something custom to be really focused for this specific story. So how did I arrive here? I started with a map, a very ugly map. It's really just plain and simple. We have space, we have places. Let's see how it looks on a map. So I've plotted all these top destinations. There's 100 or so on this map, I believe. And quickly I realized it's not going to work because all the destinations are focused on these 3 pockets. And if I were to go with this, not only would I deal with a very large and empty white page, I also have trouble in areas like Southeast Asia and West Europe, where destinations are on top of each other that you can't really distinguish from one another. And this is really not something I can solve by changing a projection if I want to have all these destinations on one view. So realizing this real-life representation is not going to work, I went to another extreme and went to, what if I go total abstraction and do something like a coordinate system? And so I constructed the one on the left with 6 axes, represent 6 continents, and I will plot the map cities along the axis based on the distance to Wuhan. So you probably can't see, but there's little ant-sized city names on the axis. And I didn't even go very far because before I can even plot any routes, I realized it's just going to be a tangled mess. So I didn't waste any time, explore further. So based on these 2 failed attempts, I realized that maybe there's something there in the marriage of the two. I like the idea of a constellation. I like the idea of a network. So I had a breakthrough when I made this little diagram on the left with Wuhan still in the center, like in the coordination system. And there are 6 arms. Each arm represents a continent, but instead of the rigid on the circle, they're kind of organic, and it's reference to where they are in real life in relation to Wuhan. So East Asia kind of goes to the north, and Europe goes to the left, so on and so forth. But it's easy to put 6 lines. What about hundreds of lines that we need? So I started doodling, and when I arrived at this, I can call it the first incarnation of this octopus diagram, that I got excited and realized this could possibly go somewhere. So these are my march down and to find out if that, like, what can I do with this? And I started with doing just Asia. That's the little one on the left, and realized, yeah, it could. It's pretty clear. You show the volume of the travel with the thickness of the line. And you can see where people are going, and you have every city represented, and they're also kind of faithful to where they are in real life, so there's still something familiar for people to understand. And that the first, on the right-hand side is the first version, the first draft, and with all the cities plotted on, and I was really excited. Yay, I have all the 100-something cities in one network, but something was still off with it. I remember someone said, this kind of looks like a swastika from afar, so that's definitely a no-go. So I adjusted the layout and put East Asia instead of straight to north and more to the west side. So this is the final layout that we ended on, and also quickly there's a mobile version, and it was a pretty painless transform, which is always a good win. And this is the this diagram lives on the page with a lot of magic from my colleagues. So instead of using the thickness of the line, we use dots to represent travel volume. So the biggest benefits of creating such a custom system is to give us the flexibility to tell a very focused story, that we filtered out all the other places we don't care about. We only focus on these 100 or so cities. And also use this as a visual tool. We can pan and zoom to different places that we want to focus on. We want to show a progression that we can highlight different routes, that you first went to Thailand, then you went to other parts of Asia, then to the rest of the world. And another important thing for this specific graphic is that it sits in a longer story. And when you get here, you already have been through probably 20 scrolls of the story about China and how the virus spread in China. So, and that was a map-based story. So here we have a different form that gives readers a signal that this is a different part of the story, and also prevent them from being bored. But making weird things is not the only thing we do. Staying with convention is also very important. So choose to stay with convention is a wise decision most of the times. I'll use the example of these neighborhood vote shift maps that I made after election. And these are precinct level maps showing how each precinct voted comparing in 2020 compared to 2016. So red arrows means a shift to the right and voted more Republican, and blue arrows means they voted more Democratic. You guys know what it means. So you would think showing shifts with arrows is a no-brainer, but at the beginning of the project, all I wanted to do was to stay away from the arrows, because I thought arrow maps are so well seen. They're presented everywhere, each election. What else can I do? So these, again, ugly maps are my early explorations. Instead of using arrows, I was using dots to show the shifts, and darker the colors, the bigger the shifts. And immediately we found the fatal mistakes of this is that if I present this to someone, they will be like, oh, did Trump win everywhere in these big cities? And which is not the case, and not what the data is showing, or not what the story is about. So stubborn as I am, I try to think maybe I can salvage this, and by just carve out the immigrant. So this story, to step back a little bit, the story is about how high majority immigrant neighborhoods actually voted more Republican in 2020 than 2016. So what if I just carve out the majority Latino, majority Asian neighborhoods and forget about the rest? And that's also not going to work because the comparison is what we're looking for. If we wash out the rest, how do we know how did these neighborhoods behave comparing to the rest? So reluctantly, I was like, okay, maybe I'll make some arrows. And I did some very crude QGIS arrows, and immediately I found that they have a big visual impact, and you don't need to read that close to the maps, and you immediately get, okay, this is showing a shift, and there's a red wave towards the right. So by this side-by-side, you can just see very clearly the one on the right with arrows. We don't need any keys. You immediately get what it's about. And another lesson is that shades of color is really hard to read, and while the length of arrow is really easy to read. So for a reader to understand the left map, they probably have to reading to the keys and what each shades of red means, while on the right-hand side, it just really intuitively shows you that the shift. And quickly moving forward, I believe in every discipline, especially in news, the function of the map is to always make a point, and it helps you tell a story. And the shape and form the maps should take should dictate, should help you to make this point. And I'm going to use the example of the tracking effort we had for coronavirus. I worked on the college tracker, and this was an effort that expanded through over half a year, and there was like monthly updates to this tracker. And as you can see, between 2020 on the left and 2021 on the right, we changed some metrics. Instead of tracking the pure number of schools, we focused more on change, and I'll show you more through the map. And this is the very first map that we made, published for the college coronavirus situation. It was published in July 2020, and at the time, we were very surprised to find out that despite school closed, despite it was summer, so many schools still have hundreds of cases. So the map really is to tell people it's not just concentrated in some areas of the country, it's everywhere. So that's the point of the map. And so using that as an example, moving forward, we kept updating this map and kept, we're tracking more schools. Some schools had bad outbreaks, so you can see from 100 cases top, we moved our legend to 1,000 cases plus. And really toward the end of 2020, this map just becomes a map with a lot of dots. It's not saying anything. It's only telling people there's a lot of schools in the United States and they all have coronavirus, which is not news to anyone. So that's why in 2021, when we were revisiting the tracker, I think, what can we do to make this tracker better? We changed the map form to these 3 maps showing the percentage change of cases. So instead of showing you pure number of cases, they're showing you the change in 2021 comparing to 2020. So immediately you can see that even though it's a new year, schools are still having cases growing pretty substantially. And we also realized it was not fair to compare a liberal arts college with 1,000 students with a state college with tens of thousands students. So that's why we made the decision to separate them. So true simplicity, that's the last point, and I don't have much time, so I'm gonna fly through this. This is a very simple cartogram we did for reapportionment after census, and basically just to show you which state gained seats and which state lost seats. And you may think, what's to talk about? I'm going to show you the more complicated versions I made before that. At first, I was like, I want to show both before and after. That's why I had the crossed out boxes for lost seats and added green boxes for new seats. And it's just like more visual chaos. And then I realized, after realizing that, and I was like, okay, maybe I can use shades of colors to convey that. But still, that doesn't quite, it wasn't really necessary. And there's something we believe in is we don't let readers do more work than they need to. And having different shades of color is really making them doing more work than needed, because really you just want to say which state gained seats, which state lost seats. And the labels are there to tell them how many seats gained or lost. So this was the final iteration that we went with. It's just plain 2 colors and tell you who gained, who lost. So to wrap up, I talked about the 4 decision-making process and with 4 projects really quickly. And again, there's no formula in how we make these decisions. It's really organic, and it's a lot of exploration, and really just to explore every idea you had and really choose the one that serves the story the best. Yeah, thank you for being here. The question is what tools I use to make mock-ups and the projects. The tool I use the most is Illustrator. It's really quick and easy. And as you saw, I also use hand drawing doodles to just jot down some ideas. And sometimes it's quick just to mock up in the browser. With the immigration votes project, we actually did a lot of mock-ups in the browser and with lots of maps with different counties and just to see how they look like. So it's a myriad of things.